Have you ever felt like money just slips through your fingers? Or worse, that there never seems to be enough? Have you ever wondered why banks always seem to win, no matter what? Well, you're about to discover secrets that most people will never know. Banks want you to trust them. They want you to think that all you need is a checking account, a credit card, and maybe a long-term loan. But the reality is very different, and the truth is not as pretty as you have been led to believe. In this video, we're going to unravel how banks have designed an almost perfect system to profit from your money. They've made us believe that saving is the key, that debt is inevitable, and that only an expert can understand the economy. But the truth is that they know formulas, tricks, and strategies that are completely in their favor, and they never share them with you. So, if you want to know how banks really operate and how you can take control of your money without falling into their traps, this video is for you. 1. The secret of interests. Let's start with something that seems simple, but is a gold mine for banks. Interest. Have you noticed that when you leave your money in the bank, they offer you an interest rate that seems like a joke? The funny thing is that with that same money, they are making huge deals, lending it to others at much higher rates, from 5% to 20%, or even more in the case of credit cards. This means that the bank is using your money to make huge profits, but only sharing a tiny fraction of those profits with you. This difference between the rate they pay you and the rate they charge is the interest margin. For banks, this represents a sure profit because in addition to using your money, they control the conditions under which it moves in the system. Through this margin, they manage to accumulate large sums of money in the long term, while you barely receive a pittance. Imagine you have $10,000 in your savings account, and the bank gives you 2% interest per year. This means that after a year, you would only receive about $200. But they take that $10,000 and lend it to someone else at 10% interest. After that same year, the bank has made $1,000 using your money, while you are left with only $200. Do you see the difference? And it's no coincidence. Banks have perfected this system to always come out ahead. This interest rate spread is their best trick, an almost invisible strategy that most people don't even notice, but that allows them to earn billions of dollars. And, of course, the bank will never tell you about it because its business is precisely to make money at your expense. That is the real story of interest, the big business of the banks. 2. The credit card trap. One of the star products for banks, and one of the most profitable, is the credit card. At first glance, it seems to make your life easier. You can buy whatever you want without having to worry about paying at that moment. But behind that convenience, there is a very well thought out strategy to make money at the expense of your finances. Every time you use your credit card, you're borrowing from the bank. And this is where the trick comes in. That money you're borrowing isn't free, but the bank is going to charge you interest. And that interest isn't friendly, as most banks charge between 15% and 25% annually on the unpaid balance. This means that if you only pay the minimum or leave a balance outstanding, you end up paying a lot more for the things you bought than they actually cost. Banks are also very clever at incentivizing you to use your card. To tempt you, they offer you points, travel miles, entries into raffles, or discounts. These benefits may sound attractive, but in reality, they are only worth it if you pay off your balance in full and on time. Banks know that most people get carried away with the card, spend more than they have, and eventually end up leaving an outstanding debt. This is exactly what they are looking for, because as long as you have an unpaid balance, the bank continues to make money on interest. Let's think about a simple example. Let's say you have a $1,000 debt on your credit card with an interest rate of 20%. If you only pay the minimum monthly amount, which is usually a low amount, it could take you several years to pay it off. In the end, that $1,000 could have cost you double or even triple. It's a kind of snowball that grows over time and that banks know how to take advantage of very well, because many don't do the math and don't realize the real cost of these debts in the long term. In other words, credit cards may seem like a help, but they are a trap for those who do not use them carefully. The bank is betting that you will fall into the temptation of spending more than you have and trapping you in a cycle of debt that generates huge profits for it. Before continuing with the list, if you find today's content interesting, I invite you to give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next video. Now let's continue. 3. Loans and mortgages, the big long-term trap. Another of the big secrets of the banks is how mortgages and long-term loans work. When you apply for a mortgage to buy a house, you probably think you're investing in a place of your own, which at the end of the term will be yours. But in reality, you're committing to paying the bank a significant sum in interest for 20, 25, or even 30 years, an amount that ends up making the total cost of your house much higher than you initially imagined. For example, let's say you have a $200,000 mortgage at 4% interest for 30 years. At the end of the term, you will have paid about $144,000 in interest alone. In other words, the house will have cost you $344,000 in total. Not only does this show how much extra money you end up paying, but it also reveals how profitable it is for the bank. At first, the majority of your monthly payments go toward interest and not principal. This is known as negative amortization, and it's something that banks have strategically designed. In the early years, monthly payments are structured so that you're paying mostly interest and very little toward the original debt. This ensures the banks that no matter what happens, they'll make their profit before you start reducing what you owe, making sure they get the biggest profit possible from the start of the loan. Over time, the proportion of your monthly payment that goes toward principal starts to increase, but by that time you've already paid a large sum in interest. This means that over the life of the loan, you'll end up paying back considerably more than you borrowed. And if you ever need to sell the house or can't keep up with the payments, you'll have invested large amounts without having reduced the principal amount of your debt very much. In short, banks lend you money for a mortgage not only because they want to help you own a home, but because they know that this long-term debt will be a constant source of income for them. 4. The illusion of safe money. Another thing that banks don't often mention is that keeping your money safe in a savings account doesn't mean you're actually financially protected. In fact, on many occasions, when the interest you receive on your account is less than inflation, as is usual, you are losing money without realizing it. Banks are aware of this reality, but they prefer you to believe that it is better to keep your money with them, creating a false sense of security. Inflation is the phenomenon where the value of money decreases over time. For example, if you could buy a certain amount of goods with $100 today, in a few years, the same amount could buy much less due to inflation. Currently, most banks offer interest rates that are well below inflation, meaning that the value of your savings is reduced every year. This is a crucial aspect that many people don't understand, and they're left with the idea that the money saved in the bank helps protect them when in reality, they are losing purchasing power. Let's say you decide to deposit $100 in a bank that pays 2% interest per year. This means that at the end of your deposit, which is to say after 1 year, you will have $102. The $100 you deposited plus the $2 is interest. So far, so good. You have made money simply by keeping your money in the bank. But if you now consider that inflation during that time was 8%, was your deposit a great investment? The answer is no. Previously, when you had $100, you could buy 50 chocolates at $2 each. But if inflation was 8%, that means that the chocolates are now worth $2.16. And with your $102, you can now buy 46 chocolates. In other words, you have more banknotes than before, but the purchasing power of these banknotes has fallen. When the inflation rate is higher than the interest rate, the real interest rate is said to be negative. You can now buy fewer things than before. Whereas when the opposite occurs, that is, when inflation is lower than the interest paid by the bank, the real interest rate is positive. It is therefore essential to be aware of the reality of safe money and consider other investment options that, although they involve risks, can offer you a return that at least exceeds inflation and, therefore, helps you protect your purchasing power in the long term. 5. How to free yourself from the banking system. So what can you do about it? How can you protect yourself from the bank strategies and take control of your money? Well, although it's hard to believe, there are many alternatives to achieve this, and here we will mention the ones we consider to be the most important. 1. Investing instead of saving. While it's essential to have an emergency cash fund for unexpected events, ideally you should have the rest of your money work for you through investments. You should explore various options such as mutual funds, ETFs, bonds, or even real estate. These alternatives can not only help you generate income over the long term, but they can also offer returns that outpace inflation. 2. Pay off credit card debt quickly. As we saw before, One of the most common traps that many people fall into is paying the minimum on credit cards, which can lead to a buildup of debt that results in high interest rates. Instead, you should make larger payments to reduce the balance as quickly as possible. Not only will this help you avoid paying more in interest, but it will also free you from the vicious cycle of debt. 3. Opt for smart loans. If the need arises to take out a loan, look for options that offer low interest rates and terms that you can comfortably manage. It is best to avoid long-term loans, since although the monthly payments are lower, they end up costing much more in interest over time. 4. Educate yourself financially. The more you understand about how money and the banking system work, the more tools you will have to make informed decisions. Financial education is key to avoiding the traps that financial institutions often offer. There are many books and courses that can help you develop your skills and knowledge in this area. By following these steps and taking a proactive approach to managing your finances, you can break free from the traditional banking system and take control of your money. It seems that banks have created a system in which everyone participates, but not everyone wins. They have carefully designed their products and services to maximize their profits while minimizing the benefits you receive. But now that you know how they operate, you have the power to make different choices. You have the power to educate yourself, to plan, and to get out of that banking dependency. Remember that banks are counting on most people not to think much about these issues and to simply continue using their products without questioning the long-term impact. But now you're no longer part of that majority. So, don't be fooled. Now you know that there are ways to make your money work for you, instead of just the banks profiting. Take your time to research and learn. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new content.